In the center of a glittering ballroom, a wealthy white woman in a designer gown stood before a black single father and poured an entire glass of red wine over his head. Laughter erupted. Phones rose. Cameras flashed. No one defended him. No one stopped her. It was public humiliation dressed up as entertainment for the elite. But what they did not know was this. That moment had just erased a $10 million deal in a single night. How could a man who was mocked in front of hundreds have the power to destroy the entire game? The invitation had arrived 3 weeks earlier on cream cardstock with gold embossing. Hale Foundation Annual Gala. Black tie. Charitable contributions welcome. Daniel Brooks had held it under the lamp in his kitchen and wondered if it was a mistake. He was not the kind of man who received invitations like this. He had built his career quietly. He solved problems other people could not see yet. He advised companies on strategy and investment, particularly in green technology, and he did it well enough that his name circulated in certain rooms but rarely made it to the headlines. The invitation was not a mistake. It came because of the deal, $10 million. A partnership between his firm and the Hale family's private investment group. The contract had been negotiated for months. It was supposed to be signed after the gala, in a private meeting upstairs, away from the crowd. Daniel's company needed the capital to scale. The Hales needed his expertise and the optics of backing an emerging black-owned firm in the clean energy sector. It was business. It was supposed to be simple. Daniel arrived alone. He had thought about bringing someone, but there was no one to bring. His son Marcus was with his grandmother for the weekend. His ex-wife had moved to another state years ago. He did not date much. He worked. He parented. He survived. The ballroom was enormous. Chandeliers hung like frozen floods of light. The walls were paneled in dark wood and mirrors. Women moved through the space in gowns that cost more than most people's rent. Men wore tuxedos that fit like they had been drawn onto their bodies. Waiters floated between clusters of guests with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that Daniel could not pronounce. He recognized a few faces. A tech executive, a state senator, a former news anchor. No one recognized him. That was fine. He was not here to be seen. He was here because the deal required it. Victoria Hale stood near the center of the room with her husband Richard beside her. Victoria was in her early 50s, blonde, angular, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. She wore a dress the color of blood and diamonds that caught the light every time she moved. Richard was older, silver-haired, with the practiced smile of someone who had spent decades at events like this. They were surrounded by a small circle of admirers. Daniel had met them both twice before, in conference rooms with lawyers present. They had been polite then, cold, but polite. He moved toward the bar. He ordered water. The bartender looked at him like he had asked for something obscene, but poured it anyway. Daniel stood off to the side and watched. He was good at watching. It was part of what made him valuable. He saw patterns. He saw what people were really saying beneath what they said out loud. Victoria's voice cut through the room before he saw her approach. "You came," she said. Daniel turned. She was standing closer than he expected, her champagne glass tilted slightly in one hand. Richard lingered a few steps behind her, observing. "I was invited," Daniel said. Victoria smiled. It was not warm. "You were," she said. As a courtesy, Daniel let the silence sit between them. He had learned a long time ago that silence could be more effective than any reply. "You didn't bring anyone," Victoria continued. Her eyes moved over him slowly, appraising. "No wife? No date?" "I'm here for the meeting," Daniel said. "Not the party." Victoria's smile widened. "How practical," she said. "That's what I like about you, Daniel. You know your place." The words landed exactly as she intended. Daniel felt the shift in the air around them. A few guests had turned to watch. Not, obviously. Just enough to listen. "My place," Daniel repeated. "You're here because we're doing you a favor," Victoria said. Her tone was light, conversational, but every word was deliberate. "You understand that, don't you? This deal, this partnership, it's charity." We don't need you. But it looks good. Optics, you know. Diversity. It's very important these days. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his face remained steady. The contract says otherwise, he said quietly. Victoria laughed. It was a bright, sharp sound that carried across the room. The contract, she said, as if the word itself was funny. Darling, the contract is a piece of paper. You think that means something here? More people were watching now. Daniel could feel their attention like heat on his skin. I think it means we have an agreement, Daniel said. Victoria stepped closer. Her perfume was heavy, floral, expensive. She looked up at him with something that might have been amusement or contempt. It was hard to tell the difference. You don't belong here, she said softly. You know that, don't you? Look around. Really look. Do you see anyone else like you? Daniel kept his eyes on her. I see a room full of people spending money they didn't earn, he said. Victoria's expression went cold. For a moment, there was something ugly beneath the polish. Then she smiled again, wider this time, and turned toward the crowd. Everyone, she called out. Can I have your attention for just a moment? The room quieted. Faces turned. Phones came out. Daniel felt the floor tilt beneath him, but he remained still. Victoria raised her champagne glass. I want to introduce you all to Daniel Brooks, she said brightly. He's one of our guests tonight. A very special guest. He's here because we're considering a partnership with his little company. Isn't that generous of us? There was polite laughter. Uncertain. Waiting. Daniel is a single father, Victoria continued. He works very hard. He's very serious, very earnest. He came here tonight all by himself, without a wife, without a date, without anyone to vouch for him. Isn't that brave? The laughter grew louder. Daniel could see phones rising. He could see the guests leaning in, sensing something about to happen. Victoria turned back to him. She held his gaze. Then she lifted her glass and poured the entire contents over his head. The wine was cold. It ran down his face, his neck, soaked into his collar and shirt. The room exploded with laughter. Flashes went off. People pointed. Someone clapped. Daniel stood completely still. He made no move to wipe his face. He kept his eyes on Victoria. Victoria leaned in close, her voice just loud enough for him to hear beneath the noise. Now you know, she said. This is what happens when you forget your place. She stepped back, smiling for the cameras. The crowd was still laughing. No one moved to help him. No one objected. They watched like it was part of the entertainment. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. He wiped his face, slowly, methodically. Then he looked at Victoria. Thank you, he said. Now I know exactly what my decision is. He turned and walked toward the stage at the front of the ballroom. The laughter faltered. People looked at each other, confused. Victoria's smile froze. Richard stepped forward, his hand reaching for her arm. Daniel climbed the steps to the small platform where the microphone stood. He took it without asking permission. The room went silent. Good evening, Daniel said. His voice carried clearly across the space. My name is Daniel Brooks. Some of you just watched me get humiliated for your entertainment. That's fine. I want you to remember this moment. He looked directly at Victoria. I came here tonight to finalize a $10 million investment deal with the Hale Foundation, he said. That deal no longer exists. As of this moment, I am withdrawing from all negotiations. There will be no partnership. There will be no contract. You will not have access to the technology, the strategy, or the credibility my company was going to provide. Victoria's face went white. Richard appeared beside her, whispering urgently. She shook her head, disbelief turning to panic. Daniel set the microphone down and walked off the stage. The room was completely silent now. He moved through the crowd without looking back. No one stopped him. No one spoke. He pushed through the doors and into the cold night air. His shirt was still wet. His hands were shaking, but he kept walking until he reached his car. Inside, alone, he finally let himself breathe. The first article appeared online before Daniel made it home. Someone had uploaded the video. It was everywhere by morning. The headline read, "Black entrepreneur storms out of charity event after controversial exchange." The comments were worse. They called him arrogant. They called him ungrateful. They said he had overreacted to a harmless joke. The video had been edited. It started with Victoria pouring the wine and ended with Daniel walking off stage. Everything she said before that moment was missing. The context was gone. He looked like a man who had lost control over nothing. Daniel sat at his kitchen table with his phone face down. Marcus was still at his grandmother's house. He was grateful for that. He wanted to protect the boy from this. He thought about his son's face, his laugh, the way he looked up at Daniel like he could fix anything. Marcus was 9 years old. He was smart, sensitive, quick to laugh. He loved science and basketball and terrible jokes. He deserved better than watching his father be destroyed on the internet. His business partner called at 7 in the morning. Her name was Rachel Morgan, and she had been with him since the beginning. She wasted no time. "The board is panicking," Rachel said. "They're getting calls. Investors are asking questions. We need a statement." Daniel stared at the wall. "What kind of statement?" he asked. "Damage control," Rachel said. "We have to say something. We have to explain what happened. I walked away from a deal with people who humiliated me in public," Daniel said. "That's what happened." "That's not how it looks," Rachel said. Her voice was tight, strained. "It looks like you embarrassed the Hales in front of their donors and tanked a $10 million partnership because you couldn't take a joke." Daniel closed his eyes. "It wasn't a joke," he said. "I know," Rachel said quietly. "But we still have to deal with this." By midday, the Hales had released their own statement. It was polished, carefully worded, dripping with false concern. They expressed disappointment in Daniel's behavior. They said they had welcomed him into their community and he had responded with hostility. They wished him well but could no longer in good conscience move forward with someone so volatile. The word volatile appeared 3 times. It was deliberate. It was a message. The bank called that afternoon. Daniel's business accounts had been flagged for review. No withdrawals would be processed until the review was complete. It would take several weeks, maybe longer. The woman on the phone was apologetic but firm. There was nothing she could do. It was policy. Daniel knew what it was. The Hales had connections everywhere. They made one phone call and his life began to collapse. The board meeting happened 2 days later. Daniel sat at the head of the table in the conference room of his own company and listened to people he had hired question whether he should remain in his position. They avoided direct confrontation. They talked about optics. They talked about investor confidence. They talked about the need for stability during uncertain times. One of them suggested Daniel step back temporarily. Let someone else take the lead until things calmed down. Rachel sat beside him and said nothing. She would not look at him. Daniel waited until they were finished. Then he spoke. "No," he said. The room shifted. One of the board members, a man named Stephen Garrett, who had made his money in pharmaceuticals, leaned forward. "Daniel," Stephen said carefully, "we're trying to help you." "By pushing me out of my own company," Daniel said. "By protecting the company," Stephen corrected. "You made a choice at that gala, a public choice. Now we have to deal with the consequences." "The consequences of not letting myself be humiliated," Daniel said. Stephen sighed. "Look," he said, "I don't know what was said between you and Victoria Hale. I wasn't there. But what I do know is that we had a deal, and now we don't. We had funding, and now we don't. We had momentum, and now we're in crisis mode. You did that." Daniel stood. He looked at each of them in turn. "If you want me gone," he said, "you'll have to vote me out. Until then, I'm still running this company." He left the room before anyone could respond. The video appeared 3 days later. It was posted anonymously but picked up immediately by every major outlet. It showed Daniel backstage at the gala, speaking to a young boy. The boy was crying. Daniel was leaning down, his hand on the boy's shoulder. The audio was muffled, but the caption claimed Daniel had threatened the child. The headline read, Disturbing footage shows Daniel Brooks confronting Hale family's 10-year-old son. Daniel watched it twice. He recognized nothing about the moment. He had not spoken to any child that night. He had not gone backstage. The video was a fabrication, but it was convincing. The lighting was right. The setting was right. Whoever made it had access to real footage from the event and had layered something else on top of it. His phone rang. It was his lawyer. "Don't say anything," the lawyer said. "Don't post. Don't respond. Let me handle this." "It's fake," Daniel said. "I know," the lawyer said. "But proving that is going to take time. And time is what they want. They want you quiet. They want you defensive." Daniel ended the call. He sat in his living room with the lights off and thought about Marcus. The boy was too young to understand what was happening, but old enough to feel it. Daniel thought about what Marcus would grow up believing about his father. The next morning, Daniel's house was vandalized. Someone had spray-painted the word "liar" across his front door in red letters. The neighbors called the police, but by the time they arrived, whoever did it was gone. The officer who took the report was polite but disinterested. He said they would look into it. Daniel knew they would not. The press camped outside his house. News vans lined the street. Reporters shouted questions every time he stepped outside. They wanted a statement. They wanted him to explain. They wanted him to react. Daniel stayed inside. Rachel called again. Her voice was different this time, colder. "The board is voting tomorrow," she said. "They're going to remove you." Daniel remained silent. "I tried," Rachel said. "I really did. But they don't think we can survive this. The Hales have too much influence, too many connections. We're losing clients. We're losing credibility. They think cutting ties with you is the only way to save the company." "And you?" Daniel asked. "What do you think?" Rachel took a long breath before answering. "I think you were right to walk away from that deal," she said finally. "But I also think you underestimated what they were capable of." She hung up. Daniel sat on the floor of his living room and let himself feel it. The weight, the injustice, the suffocating certainty that no matter what he did, it would not be enough. They had more money, more power, more reach. They could rewrite reality and make people believe it. He was just one man. He could not fight an entire system. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mr. Brooks. My name is Margaret Lewis. I worked for the Hale family for 25 years. I have information you need. Please call me." Daniel stared at the message. It could be a trap. It could be another attack. But it was also the first lifeline anyone had thrown him in days. He called the number. The woman who answered had a voice like gravel and smoke. She was old, Daniel could tell, but there was steel underneath. She sounded tired, her breathing slightly labored, as if speaking took effort. "Mr. Brooks," Margaret said, "I saw what they did to you. I've seen them do it to others. I can't stay silent anymore." "Who are you?" Daniel asked. "I told you," Margaret said. "I was their housekeeper. I cleaned their homes. I raised their children. I watched them destroy people for sport. I kept my mouth shut because I needed the job. But I'm 73 years old now. I'm not well, and I don't need anything from them anymore." "What do you have?" Daniel asked. "Everything," Margaret said. "Journals, recordings, financial records. 25 years of watching them lie, cheat, and abuse anyone who got in their way. I documented it all. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. But then I saw what they did to you, and I knew." Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. Hope. Dangerous, fragile hope. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Because I'm tired," she said. "And because you didn't deserve what they did. No one does. I don't have much time left. I want to do this one thing right." They agreed to meet the next day. Margaret insisted on a public place. A diner on the edge of town where no one would recognize either of them. Daniel agreed. That night, he barely slept. He kept thinking about what Margaret had said. Everything. What did that mean? What could one housekeeper possibly have that would matter against a family like the Hales? He found out the next afternoon. Margaret arrived at the diner in a worn coat and a scarf that covered most of her gray hair. She moved slowly, leaning on a cane. She carried a large canvas bag. She sat across from Daniel and ordered coffee. She wasted no time. "The Hales are broke," Margaret said. Daniel blinked. "What?" "Not publicly," Margaret said. "But privately, they're drowning. Bad investments. Legal settlements they've kept quiet. A lifestyle they can't afford anymore. They've been hiding it for years. Your deal was supposed to save them. $10 million to cover their debts and buy them time to restructure. Without it, they're finished." She pulled a thick folder from her bag and set it on the table. "It's all in here," Margaret said. "Bank statements, emails, settlement agreements with women they paid off to stay quiet. Records of racial discrimination lawsuits they buried. Everything." Daniel opened the folder. Page after page of documents. Some were photocopies. Some were printed emails. Some were handwritten notes in Margaret's careful script. "Why did you keep all this?" Daniel asked. Margaret looked at him with tired eyes. "Because I knew one day it would matter," she said. "I knew one day someone would need it. I just didn't know it would be you." Daniel closed the folder. His hands were shaking. "If I use this," he said, "they'll come after you." Margaret smiled. It was sad and resigned. "Let them," she said. "I'm an old woman with a bad heart. What are they going to do? I've already lived my life. But you still have a chance. Don't waste it." Daniel took the folder. He thanked her. Margaret stood to leave, but before she did, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "They want you to believe you're alone," she said. "That's how they win. Don't give them that." She walked out of the diner, and Daniel sat alone with the folder in front of him. For the first time in days, he felt something other than despair. He felt dangerous, but the Hales were not finished. The next morning, another video appeared. This one was worse. It showed the same boy from before, now sitting with his mother, Victoria, in a carefully staged interview. The boy's face was blurred, but his voice was clear. He said Daniel had grabbed him. He said Daniel had told him to stay quiet or something bad would happen. He said he was scared. Victoria sat beside him, her hand on his back, her face a mask of maternal concern. She spoke little. The image said everything. A frightened child, a protective mother, a dangerous man. The video went viral in hours. Daniel's lawyer called and said there was nothing they could do. The damage was done. Even if they proved the video was fake, people would remember the accusation. They would remember the fear in the boy's voice. The board voted that afternoon. Daniel was removed as CEO of his own company. Rachel was named interim leader. She sent no personal message. He found out from a press release. Daniel sat in his kitchen and felt the walls closing in. His career was gone. His reputation was destroyed. His bank accounts were frozen. The press was calling him a predator. Even if he fought, even if he won, the stain would never wash off. He thought about Marcus. He thought about what the boy would grow up believing about his father. For the first time, Daniel broke. He put his head in his hands and let the tears come. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, exhausted tears that came from a place deeper than anger or fear. He had done everything right. He had walked away with dignity. He had refused to play their game, and it had not mattered. They had crushed him anyway. The folder from Margaret sat on the table in front of him. He looked at it through blurred vision and wondered if it was enough. If anything could be enough. Outside, the reporters were still waiting. Daniel spent the night reading every page in Margaret's folder. Bank statements showing wire transfers to offshore accounts. Emails between Victoria and Richard discussing how to bury a discrimination lawsuit. Handwritten notes from Margaret detailing conversations she had overheard about paying off accusers. Settlement agreements with women who had worked for the Hales and been harassed, then silenced with money and threats. It was all there. 25 years of corruption, cruelty, and cover-ups. But it was the financial records that mattered most. Margaret had been right. The Hales were drowning. Their investment fund had lost millions in bad deals over the last decade. They had borrowed against properties they no longer fully owned. They had taken out loans using fake collateral. The $10 million deal with Daniel was not about expanding into green technology. It was about survival. Without that money, their entire empire would collapse within months. Daniel closed the folder and rubbed his eyes. He had evidence. He had proof. But he also knew that evidence alone would not be enough. The Hales had spent decades building relationships with people in power. They had lawyers, publicists, politicians in their pocket. If Daniel just handed this information to the press, they would bury it. They would claim it was fabricated. They would say he was a disgraced businessman trying to salvage his reputation with lies. He needed more than documents. He needed the videos to fall apart on their own. Daniel called his lawyer at 6 a.m. The man answered on the fourth ring, his voice thick with sleep. "This better be important," the lawyer said. "I need a forensic video analyst," Daniel said. "The best one you can find. I need them today." There was a long silence. "You think the videos are fake?" the lawyer said. "I know they are," Daniel said. "I need to prove it." By noon, Daniel was sitting in a small office downtown across from a woman named Dr. Sarah Mitchell. She was in her 30s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of focus that made you feel like she could see through walls. She had worked with law enforcement, with tech companies, with anyone who needed to know whether a video was real or manufactured. She wasted no time on pleasantries. "Show me what you have," Dr. Mitchell said. Daniel pulled up the video on his laptop, the one showing him with Victoria's son backstage. Dr. Mitchell watched it 3 times without speaking. Then she opened her own software and began running the file through a series of tests. "The lighting is wrong," she said after a few minutes. "See here? The shadows on your face are coming from the left, but the shadows on the boy are coming from the right. That doesn't happen unless you're dealing with 2 separate light sources or 2 separate recordings." She zoomed in on Daniel's hand, the one supposedly on the boy's shoulder. "This edge," she said, pointing to the screen. "It's too clean. When a hand rests on fabric, there's compression, texture, natural distortion. This looks like it was layered on top. Watch." She ran the video frame by frame. Daniel could see it now, the slight shimmer where his hand met the boy's shirt, the way the boy's body did not quite react to the weight of the touch. "This was composited," Dr. Mitchell said. "Someone took footage of you from the event and footage of the boy from somewhere else, then merged them. It's good work, professional, but it's not perfect." "Can you prove it?" Daniel asked. Dr. Mitchell nodded. "I can generate a full report with timestamps, metadata analysis, lighting inconsistencies, and frame-by-frame breakdowns. It'll hold up in court. It'll hold up anywhere." "How long?" Daniel asked. 2 days, Dr. Mitchell said. Daniel leaned back in his chair. 2 days. He could wait 2 days, but the Hales could not. That afternoon, while Daniel was waiting for Dr. Mitchell's report, something unexpected happened. A junior associate at one of the Hale family's law firms reached out to a journalist. The associate's name was Brian Porter, and he had been tasked with organizing the legal defense for the family. In the process, he had seen things he could not ignore: emails instructing him to delete records, conversations about how to intimidate witnesses, orders to make problems disappear. Brian was young, idealistic, and naive enough to believe the law still mattered. He leaked internal communications to a reporter at a major newspaper. The reporter, a woman named Jessica Parker who had been investigating the Hales for years, knew exactly what to do with the information. The story broke the next morning. Hale family under investigation for financial fraud and witness intimidation. The article detailed the offshore accounts, the falsified loan documents, the payments to silence accusers. It cited anonymous sources within the family's legal team. It mentioned an ongoing review by federal investigators. Victoria Hale's response was immediate and panicked. She held a press conference that afternoon. She stood in front of cameras with Richard beside her. She denied everything. She called the allegations a smear campaign orchestrated by Daniel Brooks, a man she said had been harassing her family since the gala. She claimed he was dangerous, unstable, and willing to say anything to destroy them. "We welcomed him into our home," Victoria said, her voice shaking with manufactured emotion. We tried to help him, and this is how he repays us. With lies, with threats, with attacks on our son. Richard stood stiff and silent beside her, his jaw tight. He looked like a man who knew the ship was sinking but had no idea how to swim. The press conference was a disaster. Victoria's desperation was visible. The more she spoke, the more people began to question her story. Social media turned quickly. People who had believed the videos started asking questions. Why would a man with nothing to gain fabricate an entire conspiracy? Why were the Hales so defensive? Why were federal investigators involved? The next day, Dr. Mitchell sent Daniel her report. It was 43 pages long, dense with technical analysis, but the conclusion was clear. The video of Daniel and the boy was a fabrication. It had been assembled from at least 3 separate video sources. The audio had been synthesized using voice modeling software. None of it was real. Daniel forwarded the report to his lawyer, to the journalist Jessica Parker, and to the federal investigators who had started looking into the Hales' finances. Then he did something he had not done since the night of the gala. He called a press conference. It was held in a small room at a community center. Not a glamorous venue, but it was enough. Reporters came because the story had momentum now. They came because they smelled blood. Daniel stood at a podium with his lawyer beside him and spoke clearly, without anger. My name is Daniel Brooks, he said. 3 weeks ago, I was publicly humiliated at a charity event by Victoria Hale. I walked away from a $10 million deal because I refused to accept that humiliation. In response, the Hale family launched a campaign to destroy my life. They fabricated videos. They spread lies. They used their wealth and influence to isolate me, to turn people against me, and to make me look like a threat. He held up a printed copy of Dr. Mitchell's report. This is a forensic analysis of the video that claimed I threatened a child, Daniel said. It proves the video was fake. It was manufactured. It was a lie designed to ruin me. He set the report down and picked up Margaret's folder. This, he said, contains 25 years of documentation provided by a former employee of the Hale family. It details financial fraud, discrimination, harassment, and a pattern of abuse that the Hales have hidden for decades. It shows that they are not the philanthropists they claim to be. They are criminals, and they used their power to silence anyone who tried to stand up to them. The room was completely silent. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. I am not asking for sympathy, Daniel said. I am asking for accountability. The Hales tried to destroy me because I said no, because I refused to let them treat me like I was less than human. But I am still here, and I am not going anywhere. He stepped away from the podium. His lawyer handled the questions. Daniel walked out of the room and into the hallway, where he finally let himself breathe. The federal investigation moved quickly after that, with Dr. Mitchell's report, Margaret's documentation, and the leaked emails from Brian Porter. Prosecutors had everything they needed. 2 weeks later, Victoria and Richard Hale were arrested. The charges included financial fraud, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and conspiracy. Their bail was set at $5 million. They could not pay it. Their accounts had been frozen. Their assets were under review. They spent 3 days in county jail before a relative posted bond. The media coverage was relentless. Every outlet that had vilified Daniel now scrambled to tell the other side of the story. The gala video resurfaced, this time with full context. People saw what Victoria had said before she poured the wine. They saw the cruelty, the racism, the entitlement. The narrative flipped completely. Daniel went from villain to victim to something more complicated. A man who had fought back. A man who had refused to be broken. The board of Daniel's company held an emergency meeting. Rachel called him personally. They want you back, she said. Daniel was standing in his kitchen, looking out the window at his front yard. The reporters were gone now. The vandalism had been cleaned up. Marcus was coming home that weekend. No, Daniel said. Rachel was quiet. What do you mean, no? She asked. I mean, I'm not coming back, Daniel said. You all made your choice. You chose to protect the company instead of standing by me. I understand why, but I'm not coming back. Daniel, Rachel said carefully, we made a mistake. We know that now. But we can fix this. We can rebuild. You can rebuild, Daniel said. I'm doing something else. He hung up. 3 months later, Daniel launched the Lewis Justice Fund, named after Margaret, who had passed away quietly in her sleep 2 weeks after the Hales were arrested. Her heart had finally given out, but she had lived long enough to see them fall. The fund provided legal support and resources for whistleblowers, employees facing retaliation, and anyone targeted by powerful institutions. It was funded by a coalition of investors who believed in what Daniel was trying to do. It started small, but grew quickly. Daniel also opened the Center for Truth in Media, a nonprofit dedicated to identifying and exposing fabricated content, deepfakes, and misinformation campaigns. Dr. Mitchell joined as the lead forensic analyst. They worked with journalists, law enforcement, and advocacy groups to hold people accountable for using technology to destroy lives. A year after the gala, Daniel was invited back to the same ballroom, not by the Hales, who were awaiting trial, but by a coalition of nonprofit leaders who wanted to honor his work. He almost said no. The thought of returning to that space made his chest tighten, but Marcus convinced him. You should go, Dad, the boy said. You should show them you're not afraid. So Daniel went. He wore the same suit he had worn the first time. He walked into the ballroom and felt the weight of memory pressing down on him. But this time, people stood when he entered. They clapped, they shook his hand. They thanked him. He gave a short speech. He talked about Margaret. He talked about the importance of standing up even when it felt impossible. He talked about how power only works when people are too afraid to challenge it. When he finished, he walked off the stage and out into the night. Marcus was waiting in the car. They drove home in silence. Daniel felt tired, but not broken. He felt like a man who had survived something terrible and come out changed. They had laughed when he stood silent. But when he stood tall, the entire system had to fall.